Hello and welcome back to my channel, and welcome to day 6 of my trip to North Korea that I did back in 2008. You can watch videos from other days on my tour in the North Korea playlist. I thought it was about time I put them up on here, and what you'll see was recorded not by myself, but by a cameraman we had, who I nicknamed Mr Spielberg, who went with us wherever we went on the tour. As well as his video, I'll also show you some photos I took whilst explaining the sites we visited during the day. So the previous night we'd arrived at the Pyongyang hot spring house, which lies about 20 kilometers northwest of the industrial port city of Nampho, which itself is located about 50 kilometers southwest of North Korea's capital, Pyongyang. Myself and others on my tour, there were 12 of us altogether, stayed in a complex that featured around half a dozen large posh villas that used to be holiday homes for North Korea's top officials, but now seem to be given over to tourists. The villas were connected by small roads that were lined with conifer trees and neatly attended border flowers that I explored a little after we'd finished breakfast, which oddly featured cider. Well, alcoholic breakfasts are always a winner, aren't they? We left on board our tour bus and headed back along the same country road we'd come on the night before, but this time, as it was now daytime, we could see what, if anything, was going on. Lots of people were working in paddy fields and on other farmland where most of the work seemed to be done by hand. It was good to see some of the rural countryside in North Korea, where young children would wave to us as we passed by, and so we waved back. We also passed by houses I just about made out the night before, now looking pretty bleak in the daylight. People were going about their daily business, but not in a regimented and rehearsed way I'd felt whilst visiting the Pyongyang metro and some other places in the capital. I saw one chap on a new-looking scooter, which was a surprise, given the general lack of vehicles anywhere. After about half an hour, we reached a long man-made causeway that connected a small island to the mainland. There was also a railway line running alongside the road. We were heading towards the West Sea Barrage, also known as Nampho Dam, which is probably the only sensible project to have been built under the Kim regime. It's located 15 kilometers west of the city of Nampho and was built between 1981 and 1986, with the resources of the whole country directed to its construction. It's a huge 8-kilometer long system of dams, 3 lock chambers, and 36 sluice gates that allow the passage of ships. It closes the Taedong River off from the Yellow Sea in order to supply fresh drinking water and water for irrigation, plus also generates a small amount of electricity. We were visiting the barrage on a rather wet and murky day, but it still looked pretty impressive. It's considered a major accomplishment of North Korea, although it's estimated to have cost some $4 billion, and is a commonly seen backdrop for North Korean television news broadcasts. We crossed over on it and arrived at a lighthouse on a small island, which is also home to a visitors centre. Okay, so let's drop into Mr Spielberg's video. A lady guide explains for our tour guide Shay's translations the barrage's operations and key features via an impressive large-scale model. On the walls were pictures of both Kims overseeing its construction, plus some photos of the gifts presented to Kim Jong-il that included a car by the founder of Hyundai, who came from what is now North Korea. We also watched a short film about the construction of the sea barrage that started in black and white before turning to colour after the first couple of years of the barrage's construction. We boarded back on the bus and headed into the city of Nampho, which today is home to over 300,000 inhabitants. However, it was little more than a small fishing village before becoming a port for foreign trade in 1897. It was then developed into a modern port in 1945 after World War II and grew rapidly with the help of state investment. Today, it's the country's largest and most important port, along with being home to the country's main heavy industrial plants, such as the steel complex, general tractor works, a smelting complex, shipbuilding yards, a heavy machinery complex, and a glassworks. After about half an hour, we reached our next attraction, the Cheonsangri Co-operative Farm, which doubled as a museum as well as a farm. There are two types of farm in North Korea: state farms and cooperative farms. State farms operate such that farmers are paid employees of the government, whilst cooperative farms, on the other hand, have allocated plots of land which are worked on by teams of 15 to 30 people who are paid according to the amount of food they produce. Most farms in North Korea are of the latter type, which is perhaps fortunate as they are more productive than state farms. We were met by another guide who showed us around a large building full of photos of Kim Il-sung's visits here, as well as on other farms across the country. There were even some lecterns from which he gave rousing speeches. He visited this particular farm on no fewer than 89 occasions in order to offer his special on-the-spot expertise, with every one of his visits being highlighted on large panels on the wall. We asked the guide what valuable contribution had he made here, but we didn't really get a straight answer back. It was clear, certainly by us passing by a lot of farmland elsewhere on the tour, that this was no ordinary farm, and that it had been favoured by government investment and regarded as a model farm for the rest of the country. We then went outside and were shown around some glass houses and small plots of land where they were growing fruit and vegetables. The fields certainly looked productive and well maintained, with principal crops being maize, beans and rice. It was then time to board back on the bus again, where we headed back towards Pyongyang via the Youth Hero Highway, the same 10-lane road that we'd left the capital on the previous evening. The highway is so called because it had been built by students and people under the age of 30. Completed in the year 2000, it's a point of national pride. Upon further research, some reports I've read state that 50,000 young volunteers built it by hand, as North Korea couldn't afford fuel to run machinery. Things seemed even quieter traffic-wise today, being a Sunday, as we found out that most vehicles weren't allowed on the roads on a Sunday in order to save fuel. However, we were an exception, as we had a special permit that was checked at various checkpoints along the way. After having lunch in the basement of our hotel, the Yanggakdo International, we headed back on the bus in order to do some shopping. Yes, shopping in North Korea. We were taken to the very communist-sounding No. 1 department store, located near Kim Il-sung Square. Apparently, according to Koryo tours, not many foreigners visit here, as is not normally on any tour schedules. On the ground floor, the store had selections of food items for sale, such as the beer and cider we'd been given at mealtimes, along with boxes of Ferrero Rocher, which were probably for all the embassy officials. The second floor had some electrical and furniture items for sale that your average North Korean could never afford in a million years. These included Panasonic LCD widescreen TVs for $2,450, air conditioning units, washing machines, wardrobe cabinets, beds, hi-fis, and laptop computers. Another report I read said that the customers were merely placed inside to give the store an atmosphere of being popular and used. We left the store and headed towards the river in order to visit the USS Pueblo. I'll first let the lady narrator say her piece before filling you in on the history of this vessel from the American perspective.
This is U.S. armed spy ship Pueblo. Pueblo is a U.S. armed spy ship which was captured by the heroic Korean People's Army in January 1968 while committing espionage acts in territorial waters of the DPRK. Now it is on display at the edge of the Taedong River in Pyongyang, the capital of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Long before it, another U.S. aggression ship, General Sherman, had been sunken in the river. On December 23, 1968, the U.S. imperialists acknowledged their espionage acts and sent a letter of apology of the U.S. government to the Korean people, assuring them not to violate the territorial waters in the future. Accordingly, a resolute measure was taken to expel the arrested spies of the Pueblo out of the DPRK. On the spy ship, there remain the espionage devices and historical evidences as they were when it was seized.
Okay, so the USS Pueblo is here because it was alleged to have illegally entered North Korean waters in 1968 and was subsequently captured by them. Her crew, which numbered 83, were kept imprisoned for nearly a year until General Gilbert H. Woodward signed an apology on behalf of the American government. The crew were then released over the Bridge of No Return into South Korea at the DMZ in Panmunjom. As part of the deal, the North Koreans got to keep the boat as a trophy, even though the Americans wanted it back. We were able to see the whole boat, which still housed all the American spy equipment, and were treated to a 15-minute, highly propagandist film about how the boat was captured, plus a bit on the negotiations and subsequent release of the crew. The boat was riddled with bullet and mortar holes, which were highlighted with red paint. We also saw the boat's flag, a US Navy officer's uniform, plus letters and signed agreements between the two sides. Even though the Americans agreed not to spy on North Korea again as part of the deal to release the crew, an American torpedo-light spying device was captured by the North Koreans in 2004 and was on display beside where the boat was moored up. We returned back to the hotel where we had some free time. John, his son Peter, and Nick, who were part of my tour group, wanted to play a round of pitch and putt golf on the small 9-hole course located right outside the hotel's entrance, and asked me if I wanted to be their official photographer. I said yes, of course, as the sun had finally come out and it was a lovely evening for a bit of surrealness. They hired some golf clubs, tees and a trolley, plus the price also included a caddy in the form of a young North Korean girl. Day 6 was our last full day in North Korea. The following morning we left Pyongyang and North Korea on a train from the capital's main train station. As we stepped off the bus one last time, I spotted something that I hadn't expected to see in North Korea, an advertising billboard. This particular one was for a series of cars made by Pyongyang Motors in conjunction with China that has only been producing cars since 2002. Apparently, it's the only company in North Korea that's allowed to advertise. The station was surprisingly busy with people standing beside a waiting train that had the North Korean emblem and destinations in both Korean and Chinese on its green carriages. Our guides, Kim and Shay, showed us to our carriage, located at the far end of the train, one of just 2 carriages that were going all the way to Beijing. Our carriage had 3 4-berth compartments for the 12 of us. We said our goodbyes to our tour guides who gave us back our mobile phones that we had to hand in when we first arrived in the country, but they told us not to turn them on until we had reached the Chinese border. They had been excellent, and whenever I see news about North Korea, I always think of them and hope that they're doing okay. The train pulled out of the station at 10 past 10, and we passed by mostly flat landscapes of rice paddy fields, plus a few stations located in the middle of nowhere. I managed to sneak off a few photos as we passed by villages and the general countryside. We then arrived at the North Korean border city of Siniju at about 4 o'clock, an hour later than what was indicated on the timetable I found hung up at one end of our carriage. It only showed the distances between each station on the Chinese side of the border, with Beijing shown as being 1103 kilometers away from Dandong, the large Chinese city on the other side of the border. Not long after arriving, some North Korean border guards came along and took our passports. This ended up taking quite some time. However, we eventually received our passports back, and the train set off over the Yalu River that marks the border between North Korea and China. The bridge, built by the Japanese between 1937 and 1943, when they occupied the area, is known as the Sino-Korea Friendship Bridge and doubles up as a road and rail bridge. Whilst going over, we passed the remains of an older bridge that the Japanese had built in 1911, only for it to be destroyed by the Americans during the Korean War. It was then only partially rebuilt, as it spans only half of the river from the Chinese side, as the North Koreans didn't want it to be fully rebuilt in order for them to say that the Americans couldn't deny destroying it. Therefore, it's been given the nickname Broken Bridge. The train arrived at Dandong Station, located only about 500 meters from the bridge. The differences between where we now were and where we'd just come from were extreme. Masses of people everywhere, vehicles, traffic, huge tall office and apartment buildings, hotels, shopping malls, advertising billboards. By contrast, we had only seen a few buildings with chimneys on the North Korean side of the border. Anyway, I now knew that I had survived my time in North Korea, and what a time it was. The most surreal week of my life. And that was my tour to North Korea. Hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, then please give me a like, comment down below, and also why not subscribe to my channel and view the playlist of all my videos from North Korea. For now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.